Once you found it, if you would please stand. First chapter of Deuteronomy. These are the words that Moses spoke to the Israel, to all of Israel in the wilderness, east of the Jordan, that is, in the Arabah, opposite Suf, between Paran, Tophel, Laban, Hazeroth, Dizahab. It takes 11 days to go from Horeb to Kadesh Barnea by the Mount Seir road. In the 40th year, on the first day of the 11th month, Moses proclaimed to the Israelites all the Lord had commanded him concerning them. This was after he had defeated Sihon, king of the Amorites. He reigned in Heshbon, and at Edrei he defeated Og, king of Bashan, who reigned in Ashtaroth. East of the Jordan, in the territory of Moab, Moses began to expound this law, saying, "The Lord our God said to us at Horeb, you have stayed long enough at this mountain. Break camp and advance into the hill country of the Amorites. Go to all the neighboring peoples of Arabah in the mountains, in the western foothills of the Negev, and all along the coast, the land of the Canaanites, and Lebanon, as far as the great river Euphrates. See, I have given you this land. Go in and take possession of the land the Lord swore he would give you to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and to all their descendants after them." May the Lord add a blessing to the reader, hearers of his written word. Last week, as you know, as said, we dealt with reset. I said that I do reset part 2. Stand here. I don't know if I can do it as strong as I did last week, but I'm going to give you what I have. Amen. And so, just for those that may not have been here, we're still dealing with the series Back to My Future. Oftentimes in life, we've gotten off track, and what God intends for us is not always what is happening with us now. And so we talked about last week how sometimes in life we have to hit the reset button because we get off track in terms of what God has intended for us. And sometimes we have to remind us, God has to remind us, that's not the life I have given you. And so we have to hit the reset button to realign ourselves, just as we do often with, be it a modem or, as I talked about my cable box last week. Sometimes even our phones have to be reset. Oftentimes that they won't function the way at full capacity. And oftentimes you have to reset. The phone has to be reset sometimes. So in life, there are things that have to be reset. And that sometimes we don't operate to our normal capacity because we allow the things in life to get to us and affect us. And so therefore we have to be reminded of what God has for us and what God expects from us. So we've been talking about resetting, getting back to that original place, that original thing that God, and also out of reset, what also happens is that when we reset something, we restore it. It is restored back to its original state. So not only do when we reset, we restore it back to its original place and position that it should be functioning out of. And life can be like that. There's some things that you have gone through, there's some trials and there's some troubles. And if you're not careful, the trial and the trouble will dictate your destiny. Instead of the thing that has been predestined over your life, your destiny becomes shaped by the circumstances that are surrounding you. I've always said, don't allow yourself to make permanent decisions out of temporary circumstances. And far too often we allow ourselves to to make permanent decisions out of situations that will change. And so it's always important to reset yourself back to what God has intended for your life. Because things in life will be thrown at you. But those things should never be the thing that causes you to make decisions. You make decisions based upon what God says and not what's thrown at you. So in other words, once again, we have to do what? Reset. We reset ourselves so that we can be restored back to that place where God is controlling things in our lives. Today's text is an interesting text because in this particular text we find the Israelites. They are, we're told that they're east of the Jordan, and they're at they're right at the mountain, Mount Seir, not Mount Seir, but right at Moab, which is right before the mountain. And so they're sitting on the east side of the Jordan. They've not come into the promised land yet, and it's been some 40 years. They're technically in the wilderness, but also what we define as the plains. They're in the plains, but they have not gone into the promised land yet. And so here we find them, and the text tells us that in verse 2, it takes 11 days to go from Horeb to Kadesh Barnea by the Mount Seir road. It takes 11 days. And so it's an 11-day journey, but they've spent, watch this, 40 years. 40 years, which was supposed to be an 11-day journey. 40 years in the wilderness, in what we call the plains, and never entering into the promise. And so God comes, and I love this, I'm gonna get straight into this. In verse 6, he says, look, Lord said to us at Horeb, you have stayed here long enough. Now watch what he said. You have stayed long enough at this mountain. Now watch this, I need you to get this. You stayed long enough at the mountain. In other words, they had not entered the mountain, but they were what? At the mountain. They were still in the plains, but they could not cross the threshold into the promise. And so God had become concerned about his people because he knew that they had stayed in the plains and had gotten comfortable in the plains. And he was saying that you stayed here long enough. This is not your final destination, but they had gotten comfortable in that particular spot. Can I just pause here right now and say there's some places that you've gotten far too comfortable with. It's not what God had intended for your life. Can I just knock on your door, come in your house right now? I'm gonna do it anyway. There's some people and some things that you settled for. You settled in your life far too often. God had a whole lot more, but you got comfortable in some places and with some people that you were never supposed to be comfortable with. Amen, somebody. You settled for some friendships that really weren't supposed to be friendships. You settled for some jobs that really were supposed to be a means to a particular end, but you got comfortable. God still had more for you. Watch this. Reset. You were not supposed to get settled in that particular spot, because that's not the promise, that's the plane. Oh God, y'all missed that. They were in the plains. There's some things that are simple and plain, but God has something greater for you in his promise. So we've got to what? Reset ourselves. And I love what he said. He says, you've stayed here too long. You've stayed here too long. There's some places and some things right now, you've stayed too long. You've stayed too long being the foot of everything and not the head of everything. You've stayed too long. You've stayed too long broken and beat up. You've stayed there too long. You've stayed in some places far too long. God has much greater for your life. That's not the promise. You've got to know the promise versus the plan. All right. There's some plans in your life that you've settled for. Don't settle for less than what God has for you. They stayed 40 years in a particular place, and it was at the edge of the promise, but not in the promise. Sometimes we get close and then we stop. We stop at the edge of our breakthrough. We stop at the edge of really how God wants to bless us. And that's where they were. And so God comes and he says, look, you stayed long enough at this mountain. Break camp and advance into the hill country of the Amorites. Go to all the neighboring peoples in the Arabah. So now God is telling them to what? Break camp and move into the territory that I have for you, that I've already given you. I love this. Watch this. So God says, break camp, go. Now go in the Hebrew, there's really no go in Hebrew. There is no word go in Hebrew. Of course, now I'm teaching you something here. Let me break this back. Old Testament is really in Hebrew. So we translate Hebrew in order to understand the true meaning. Well, there's really, oftentimes in the Hebrew, the New Testament was Greek in the scrolls. And oftentimes there wasn't a word in Hebrew that fit the English word. So we came close as we could to those words. So we lose something in the translation. So in the real sense, there's no, that's why it's interesting when folk, I'm going to go here anyway. When folk think that the King James Bible was written by God. That's ignorance. That's true ignorance. All of it we inherit from scrolls. Scrolls from the New Testament came in Greek, and scrolls from the Old Testament, Hebrew. So when the scrolls were translated, we got as close as we could to the wording. So all of it is off. That's why you always seek God for the understanding of the word as well. So when we look at the word go, the go in this particular, used in this particular context, there is no go in the Hebrew. There is no go. What it really says is come. That's the meaning. Come, not go. God says what? Come. Now that's deep. He said, look, you stayed here too long. I need to reset yourself so that you can what?
come. You've gotten comfortable in the plains. Watch this. That's not really where I am. I'm already over in the promise. And I'm trying to tell you to come where I am. So he's saying what? Come. That's why he tells them, look. In verse 8 he says, what? See, I have given you this land. See, I have given you this land. In other words, he's saying what? Come and take a look. God is saying what? Come look that it's already yours. Come examine this thing. Watch this. There's some things that you've been looking at in your life right now. And you've been looking at far too long. You're stuck because your vision. See, God had to change their vision. The Bible says that a people will perish without a vision. They've been stuck in the wilderness and looking at wilderness things so long for 40 years that all they knew was what? Wilderness. God needed them to come and see what he had done for them because they'd been stuck and satisfied with what they had set up for themselves. Oh, don't miss that. Don't miss that. They couldn't move beyond because they were stuck on and satisfied with what they had done themselves rather than what God was getting ready to do. Oh, some folk are still in the wilderness and in the plains today because you think you've done enough. You think you've gotten enough. You think you got your little house. You got your little car. You feel good about what you've done. And God keeps saying, I got more for you. You're just in the plains. Research. We get comfortable in the plains. And all of a sudden you start looking at what you've done rather than what God is getting ready to do in your life. We get satisfied with what we can see. In our context, we're not willing to come where God wants us to come because we're satisfied with what we can see. God has more. God always has more. You just have to be willing to what? Keep going. So he tells them to come and see. Now, after he tells them to come and see, God says in the text what? He says, come. There's two goals that represent come. Go to all the neighboring peoples of the Arabah. And then he comes back again. And verse 8, he said, see, I have given you this land. There's some things that God has already given you. So then he turns around and says, go in, come in, watch this, and take possession of the land. So now not only is it come and see that what I've done, but now it's come and do what? Take possession. So now you not only must we change some things that we're looking at, we have to, in order to change and take possession of what God has for us, we've got to release some things that we are presently looking at. So we have to change our position, and so that we can see what God has for us. Now, once we see what God has for us, then we have to go in and seize what belongs to us. There's some things that you need to seize in your life. Look, everybody want everything to come easy. Do you realize that the things of God don't always come easy? It's not going to be a cakewalk every every time. God's not going to hand it to you on a platter every time. You have to come in and seize what belongs to you. You have to seize what belongs to you. And there's some things of God, there's some promises that belong to you. And you've got to decide that I'm going to seize and take possession of what belongs to me. The devil comes to what? Rob, steal everything, and kill and destroy everything. And there's some things right now that you allowed and you've existed in the plains and beneath the promises of God because you've allowed the devil to stop you in your tracks. And there's some things that the devil has taken from you. He's stolen from you. But I challenge you to go in right now amongst the devil and the enemy and begin to seize and take back what belongs to you. It belongs to you. It belongs to you. The land had already been given to them by God. And so the enemy didn't matter. Oh, let me say that again. The enemy did not matter because God had already given them the land. There's some things that God has already given you, and it doesn't matter how big your enemy is. There's a joy that God has already given you, and it doesn't matter how big your enemy is. There's a peace that God has given you, and it doesn't matter how big your enemy is. There's a mercy that God has given you, and it doesn't matter how big your enemy is. There's some riches and glory that God has given you, and it doesn't matter how big your enemy is. It does not matter. There's some things that we have to seize. We can't become, I love what, and I know we're in the midst of celebrating Dr. King's birthday was on the 15th. We celebrate Tuesday. And I remember in one of his sermons, The American Dream, he says, now this isn't the I Have a Dream sermon. He says in the American Dream sermon, he talks about a psychological term being called maladjusted. And he says in that particular sermon that there's certain ills and things that are occurring in life. And you know what? I'll never become well adjusted to allowing someone to make me believe that I'm less than. I'll never become adjusted to believing that the socioeconomic breakdown says that people of dark skin color or brown color should make less than. There are certain things that we should never become adjusted to. In other words, he says that if you are a Christian, he said, I never become adjusted to racism. There's some things that we should never become adjusted to. There's some claims that you should never become adjusted to. If it means that I'm going to be maladjusted, then I'll be a maladjusted person. Because there's just simply some things that I just can't adjust myself to. I will never become adjusted to living like my God is not a great God. I'll never become adjusted to accepting just anything anybody want to give me. I'm not going to stay in the wilderness. I'll never become adjusted to understanding that my God is a great and awesome God. I don't care what the world says. I understand that the God I serve is a mighty God. I'll never become adjusted to believing that he cannot open a door that's been closed. I'll never become adjusted to thinking that he can't be my bridge over troubled waters. I'll never become adjusted. There's some things that you should never adjust to in this society. I'll never become adjusted to understanding that some folk in this world believe that we serve and our faith is fruitless But I don't believe that. I will be maladjusted. If you think I'm crazy, then just keep on thinking I'm crazy for believing God. I'll never become adjusted to those things. I'll believe till the day I die. There's some things that we should never adjust to. We should never be afraid or ashamed of this gospel of Jesus Christ. You should never adjust to the plains and the wilderness and believing that you can't wear who you are outwardly and you can't profess Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior no matter where you are. I will never adjust to that because God has too many promises for me. He is an awesome God, and we have to go in and take possession of what belongs to us. God has some things that belong to you. They belong to you. So I challenge you this morning as I get ready to close. Keep going. Keep going. God's not done yet. There may be some trials, but keep going. Don't get comfortable with where you are. God has more. Keep going. Don't get stuck in what has happened because God's getting ready to do something else. Keep going. Stuff will happen, but doesn't negate what God has planned for you in 2016. Keep going. It's 2016. Keep going. You know, and sometimes, you know what? There's going to be some nightmares, but God still has some big dreams for you. So keep going. Keep going. You've stayed here too long. Too long. That's what God is saying this morning. Closing. You've stayed in certain spots too long. You've been stuck too long. It's time to get off the merry-go-round. You've been circling around the wilderness far too long. It was an 11-day journey, but it's taken 40 years. There's some blessings, and the great part is that the blessing is still there. It's time for you to enter into the blessings that God has for you. You've been stuck too long. It's time. This you ought to declare. As I've said, we are resetting some things in 2016, this January right now. We're professing that we're not going to walk the same way. We're not. This year is going to be different than every other year we've ever encountered, because this year is changing. We're changing it. God is changing it this month, right now. No more sitting at the edge of the mountain. It was King who said that, you know what, I went up to the mountaintop. He said, I went up there and I saw some things. He had a vision. It's time for you to enter the mountaintop and see some things. And it's time for us to make the dream a reality. 2016. Reset and get back to the future that God has for you. Back to the things that God has planned for you. It's not too late. Right now, God is trying to reset some things in your family. What He intended your family to be. I know you've been through all kinds of stuff with family members, but He has an intentionality. Your family wasn't supposed to reside in the wilderness. Your family's supposed to be in the promise. And you've stayed in the wilderness and the plains with your family far too long. And so now God is declaring this year that, you know what, I'm resetting some things. And I'm moving you into my promises. Now you just need to go and take possession. I gave you them. It's your family. I gave them all to you. And it's time for you to take possession. God keeps saying, somebody, you're looking for somebody else, but I've chosen you to take possession.
Hallelujah.
It's 2016. Reset. You've been stuck in a rut. There's some folk in here that's supposed to be entrepreneurs, but you're still working for somebody else. You kept talking about it. You've been talking about it for the last 10 years. And you still have not moved out to take possession of it. God has already given it to you, but you won't go into the hills and begin the battle. You've stayed here too long. Too long. It's time to go. Look at somebody and say, you stayed there too long.
Stayed there too long.
I can't mention everything, but you know that there's some things in your life right now that you've been in the wilderness. You've been in the plains. And now it's time. God is saying it's time. It's time. It's time for you to enter into the promise. Come out of the wilderness. It's time for you to come out of the plains and come into the promise. It's time. You stayed here too long. We come against all forms of depression right now in the name of Jesus. You've been down and you've been depressed far too long. And you know what? And you've got a whole lot to rejoice about and be thankful about. And God is not done yet. God's not finished with you yet. God's not finished blessing you. You stayed there too long. No more depression. Because the world didn't give you this joy. And the world can't take this joy away. That's a promise, that God has a promise. It's time. The Bible declares that you ought to taste and see that the Lord is good. You've looked at all the problems and everything that's broken down far too long. You've looked beneath the blessing far too. It's time for you to taste and see. Taste and see that the Lord is good. The Lord is good. You need to declare that right now, that you know what, in 2016, I'm going to taste and see because I'm going into my promise. I'm coming out of the plains. My life has been plain for too long. It's time for me to taste and see. Here are some miracles from me. Taste and see that the Lord is good. God has some good things for you right now. Don't you let no devil in hell tell you that you gotta stay in the bad. God has some good things for you today. It's my year. It's my time. It's my breakthrough. I'm gonna taste. I'm serious. It's time. It's time. It's time. Touch somebody and say it's time. It's time. somebody know I ain't leaving this church the same way I came in here. It's time. I'm ready to taste and see. I'm ready to get what God has for me. I'm not going to be satisfied and settle for less. I'm tired of this mess. Because God is trying to bless me. I'm ready. You let nothing else shape your life but the Lord your Savior. It's time. It's time for you to enter the promise. It's time for you to come out of the plains. No more playing. It's time for the promise. You stayed there too long. Reset. 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 I was not destined to live in the wilderness. That was not his plan. If you're in the wilderness this morning, that's not God's plan for your life. God did not create us to live in the wilderness. God created us to be with him in glory. It's time for you to reach your glory. It's time. It's time. Reset. 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 There's some people God wants to send your way. You need some new friendships. Reset. You need a new network. Reset. Reset. It's time because you've got some negative people around you in your camp. And all they know how to do is live in the wilderness, and you're trying to get to the promise. And sometimes what has to happen is that you have to decide to come out of the wilderness so that everybody else will begin to come out of the wilderness. Reset. It's time. Sometimes God chooses you to come out so that other folk can come out. It's time. You keep waiting for somebody else to lead your family, but God is saying, I'm choosing you. You keep waiting for somebody else to lead your friends, but God says, I'm choosing you. Come out. Reset. Come out. You stayed here too long. Look, and I'm going to get ready to close this. I don't care where you've been. I don't care what's on your record. I don't care how many times you've been to jail. I don't care. None of that matters. I don't care how much trouble you've been in. None of that matters. I don't care how many broken relationships you've gone through. None of that matters. What God has promised for you is still intact. I don't care how bad, how many financial breakdowns you've had. What God has promised is still intact. You just need to reset and line up with it now. You need to start acting like you're blessed by him. You need to pick your head up and stop being defeated. Because God says, look, come in and see that I've already given you possession of it all. You're not defeated. We are more than conquerors. Reset. Reset. Doors of the church are open.